Jenny Hallett, and on November 5th, 2014, I came home to find my beautiful, extremely intelligent and loving 26-year-old daughter, Brittany Rose Hallett, dead in her bed from losing her battle with alcohol addiction. And here's a photo of her. This is my daughter Brittany, just 26 years old. And that's why I'm here today. I can remember very distinctly that before the paramedics and the coroner had even left my house, I literally wanted to just scream from the mountaintops about everything I had learned that everyone else needs to understand about the very real dangers of the common but agonizing brain disease of alcohol addiction that I have never known until my own daughter struggled with it and died from it. Where are the public service announcements warning people about this very preventable disease? People don't realize that even though they might be a social drinker for decades, they too can still become addicted to alcohol someday. People don't realize that 1 in 12 adults has a drinking problem in the United States. We all know someone who's affected by it, even if we don't know it, because they're very, very good at hiding it. People don't realize that those who believe that drinking alcohol always remains a simple choice, those people are probably the most vulnerable to becoming addicted to it themselves someday, because all people that are addicted to alcohol or other drugs used to believe in those lies until one day they had accidentally crossed over the invisible line into becoming dependent on their substance of choice, themselves. And then they are on the other side of the judging, hateful public. People don't realize that the brain disease of addiction is a progressive disease, which means that every single alcoholic drink that is consumed by the addicted person actually makes it harder and harder to stop. So it's really important to get help as early as possible. And most of what I had to say goes right along with drug addiction as well. My daughter was raised in a very loving home. She knew how much we loved her, and we knew how much she loved us. Her father and I rarely drank alcohol, maybe 2 or 3 times a year on special occasions, and never around our kids. We never had alcohol in our house. We just didn't care to drink it. My daughter was a straight A student her entire life, with maybe a few B's along the way. Not because we made her, but because she wanted to work hard and get good grades. She was extremely intelligent and had everything going for her. As beautiful as she was, she had a hard time seeing that in herself. I started seeing loads of photos that she and her friends were posting online of all the partying she was doing with her friends at college that involved alcohol. Now, I didn't like seeing this, but I never in my wildest dreams would have ever considered her becoming dependent on alcohol someday, let alone dying from it. She met a guy that I believed she would marry in the near future because they were madly in love with each other. They had picked out a boy's and a girl's name for their future kids that they hoped to have one day. The two of them lived together for about 2 years, and I thought everything was going amazingly well for them until he asked her to move out. I suspect now that her drinking played a big role in that decision, but I had no idea that she even had a problem at the time. She moved back in with me for a while to get her feet back under her. In less than a couple of months, I came home to find her hallucinating, which was from acute alcohol withdrawal, which most people don't realize you can get hallucinations from that. While she was in the hospital, I told her that she could not come back home unless she agreed to go to one of the best inpatient rehab facilities in the country. for 30 days. It cost us $16,000 out of pocket to send her there, and that was at half off. Who can afford that for very long? She started drinking again within 2 days of getting out. I rushed her by ambulance 5 or 6 times over the next year because of acute alcohol intoxication. One of the ER doctors said that her BAC, blood alcohol content level, was the highest he had ever seen anyone survive at 0.62. So the legal limit is 0.08. You can usually go into overdose and die into a coma at 0.40. She went to some outpatient programs and went to another inpatient program closer to home for about 3.5 weeks. She had to leave early because of insurance. Addiction to alcohol and other drugs is a very isolating disease. I think my daughter began to stay at home to drink so she wouldn't be found out by her family and friends. In the end, she really didn't have any friends to hang out with because most of the things that her friends wanted to do all involved alcohol. It was really tough for her because there was no place that she could go to have fun that didn't involve people drinking alcohol. So she stayed at home, feeling even more isolated and more depressed, causing her to want to drink all alone in her bedroom. The isolation only perpetuates their anxiety and depression, which then perpetuates drinking even more. It's a vicious cycle that gets more and more out of control. Most of her close friends had no idea that she even had a problem because she hid it very well. But of the few that did know, not one person stood by her and invited her to do things that did not involve alcohol, not a single one. Brittany had great health insurance for other normal diseases through her father's insurance until she turned 26. But it did not cover her for the long-term inpatient treatment that she needed to save her life from the brain disease of addiction, like it would have if she had had cancer or diabetes or heart disease. Did you know that 90% of people suffering from addiction never get the help that they need? Only 10% get help, and usually far too little help to really make a difference. Can you imagine not giving treatment to 90% of all cancer, diabetes, and heart disease patients? Can you imagine only helping 10% of them? Why do we treat people with the brain disease of addiction differently? Why do we tell them to just fend for themselves? We wouldn't tell a cancer patient, diabetes, or heart disease patient to just fend for themselves and just choose to get over it. Some say that those addicted to substances brought it on themselves by choosing to drink alcohol or take the drugs in the first place. Does that really mean that they deserve to die? If that's true, then why do we help people with cancer, diabetes, and heart disease? Because those actually certainly can be caused by choices that those people made, such as smoking, eating sugary and fatty foods. Why is it different for addiction? My daughter was basically given a bandage when she needed a tourniquet to survive. She was thrown a 3-foot long rope to pull herself up out of a 300-foot deep, dark well. That's why the Just Listen organization is such a valuable resource to this community. This is a debilitating disease that can really hit people hard, make it impossible to hold down a job or to maintain their school or college classes. My daughter had been continuing her high level of high grades in college, where she was working on a bachelor's in accounting, until suddenly, toward the end, she started getting D's and F's for the very first time in her life. She was just 13 credits away from completing her bachelor's degree. And that's when alcohol got a vice grip on her and took her down swiftly with a vengeance. The types of services that Just Listen offers can be invaluable to those that are struggling as my daughter did. With 72,000 deaths from drugs last year, and with 88,000 alcohol-related deaths every year in the United States, I cannot express how valuable the ED2 recovery service is for people who are in the emergency room resulting from addiction, feeling scared and lost and hopeless. They're so sick and overwhelmed that they don't know where to turn to get affordable help, that they need to pull themselves back up out of that deep well. So, it's a very critical moment to be able to reach someone by throwing them a lifeline. Just having someone care enough to explain their options can be the key to reaching someone and getting them to open up to the possibilities of getting into recovery. The recovery coaching that Just Listen provides is also very important, because the coaches keep in touch with the person that is working on their recovery. The coach can help keep them on track to follow the plan that they've chosen to take. And it's so easy for them to get discouraged and to want to give up. But the recovery coaches can help keep them encouraged and motivated to keep pushing forward. They can make sure that the right resources are made available for them to review and to consider. The support groups that Just Listen facilitates are essential to keeping everyone on track. The support group for the people in recovery helps the people that are working on their own recovery, and these meetings are very important because it's well known that getting into recovery is all alone is extremely difficult to do. They need to have their peer support from people who understand what they're going through. People can learn what worked and what didn't work for getting their peers into long-term recovery. This support helps to bring them out of isolation, which can also help to reduce anxiety and depression as well. Since addiction to alcohol and drugs is a family disease, it's also important to have support groups to help the family and friends begin to understand more about addiction, so they can be more empathetic and understanding. Being a loved one can be extremely overwhelming, because there's very much to learn at a time when they're just feeling totally emotionally drained. Having support for them can help speed up their learning curve. It also offers emotional support from other people who have a loved one struggling with addiction too, and they can support each other through this difficult time. Almost done. Although my sweet daughter Brittany only struggled with alcohol addiction, I got trained in how to administer naloxone, which is generic Narcan that reverses an opioid overdose, because I want to help people suffering from alcohol and all drug addictions. Since addiction is addiction, no matter the choice of substance. Just 9 days later, I actually helped to save a young stranger's life with it. It was the most miraculous thing I've ever witnessed in my entire life. He was pasty gray blue and not breathing when I got there. His girlfriend was already performing CPR with 911 on the phone. I administered the naloxone, and then when the paramedics got there, they administered the second dose I had prepared. Within a couple of minutes, he rolled his eyes open, took a deep gasping breath, and sat straight up and was talking. I just broke down crying because I knew that there was a mother out there that had no idea of how close she had just come to having to endure a lifelong, agonizing grief with every single breath that she would ever take for the rest of her life. Narcan is so incredibly important because a person cannot get into recovery if they're dead. The Narcan training that Just Listen provides is truly life-saving. I think that the farm check services is just awesome. because it allows for an option to get help. I can't even see. Sorry. I'm going to start over. So I think that the Farm Check Patch Services is just awesome because it allows for an option to help keep people sober without having to put them in jail for having brain disease. It's a great motivator for people to really dig deep and stay sober, which can get them started on a lifelong path to recovery. I'm so impressed with Tina Perry for what she and all of her team have done to help those that have struggled as my daughter did. The services offered through Just Listen are needed tremendously. On behalf of my sweet Brittany Rose, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you do. And I'd also like to say that I do have a website and a Facebook page where I post a lot of information about alcohol addiction. I've got some papers here, hopefully it's okay to hand out. But it's at www.brittany's, with an S, ACAP, so that's ACAP.com. Stands for Brittany's Alcoholism Counseling and Prevention. And like I said, there's a Facebook page. So, love you forever, sweet Pete, Brittany Rose.